Welcome to Epilepsycast, the podcast about all things epilepsy from Epilepsy Action. Hello!
Hey Hattie, it's been a minute, 6 whole months. Apparently our last podcast was in September, so it's been a long time.
Blimey, 6 months ago, and we're back with a special bonus episode for Purple Day, which is hopefully maybe even the day that you're listening on.
It will be. I think it will be. Yeah. So we're doing a little chat with Maisie Adam, who is a comedian. She's been on a lot of shows you might have seen her on, such as Mock the Week, the Ranga Nation show, a lot of other panel shows, and she has her own stand-up special as well, which is on Amazon, I believe, called Vague. And me and you watched it. What did you think about it?
I thought it was awesome. It's all about her growing up and kind of coming of age, but she was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 14. So all about kind of how all of that played against each other and played off each other. And it is. I thought it was genuinely hilariously funny.
Yeah, it's really good, and the audience loved it that were in the show, and it's kind of all like from her perspective, how she sees her epilepsy, how she coped with it growing up, and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll go into that interview now, and take it away, us two. Yeah, I know this is a question you've probably heard a lot over the kind of the last year, but we're going to ask it anyway because, I mean, I think it's, it's become standard now. But how has, COVID and the year and all that kind of been? Because it seems from, my perspective, because I watched Mock the Week and stuff like that, that you've had, a really, good past year almost, in a weird way, because you've been, on Mock the Week, running a nation show, all that. And it kind of seems like your career's, on the up, even.
I mean, I don't know if that's... I don't know what that says about me. The year that my career seems to strive in is the year that everybody else is having an absolute crisis. I can't... The pandemic's been obviously really tough for everyone, and lockdown's been horrendous. But I seem to have been really, really lucky with what work I've been able to do, the fact that I've been able to strive career-wise in a pandemic. I don't want really that to be my niche thing,
Hopefully when live crowds come back, they will show up.
Maisie. She's only really good when there's a mass pandemic on. But yeah, you're right. I've been very lucky, and I've had some lovely opportunities to work through lockdown. I mean, it's been, you've mentioned the telly stuff there, that's been great, and then there's been online gigs which have varied, much like what we were talking about with the podcast. There's some that go great and there's some that go horribly wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But such is life.
Yeah, of course. And what's it like to gig without an audience there in front of you?
It's really weird, but genuinely, all the online gigs have varied in how they are as a format. So you'll do some where there's 50 faces on a Zoom call, and it's great because you can actually see, if anything, you've got more to go off in terms of crowd work. If you're gigging normally, you'll go, oh, what's your name? And I go, Hattie, and you're like, okay, right, tell me something about yourself. Whereas with this, you can literally go in about their living rooms, about their full name is usually in the bottom, so there's so much more to go off with. Which makes the other online gigs the ones where they're like, okay, just perform your comedy into the webcam, please.
Right.
And you can't see anybody. It's horrible. It's like doing your stand-up routine in the mirror, which is something I think you only do if you're having a breakdown. So those ones have been pretty...
When you're really nervous and practicing it in front of the mirror, almost.
Yeah, those ones have been rough.
Yeah, that sounds really, really rough.
Yeah, we were talking about before we started that we both applied to be on one of these Zoom kind of live situations.
Really?
Yeah. I think Hattie was saying Radio 4.
Oh, wow.
Some of the audiences and stuff.
Yeah.
Just take the opportunity because it doesn't come up very often.
It's been really enjoyable as well. From the act's perspective, when we've been doing TV stuff and you chat to the Zoom audience, it's been kind of that, because I think a lot of people don't realise that when you record stuff like Mock the Week at a studio, it's about 3 hours. So when you've got them in the room, as in outside of COVID times, that's 300 people who have come thinking it's going to be just like it is on the telly.
Yeah.
But then you're told you cannot move, you can't take photos, you can't go to the loo, you have to wait till it's done. And actually, with Zoom, you still have all of the people who are big fans of the shows and stuff and are giving lots of applause and everything, but they can have a wine from their fridge. Do you know what I mean? It's quite nice.
At Lou as well.
Yeah, it's quite nice, really. So
Yeah, I applied to be very different. I applied to be on I don't know, WWE wrestling. They had to go to like this massive arena where they got like Zoom fans all the way around. I ain't got my application yet, but I'm hoping front row, just like from like.
That's what I mean. It's like how big is it? How big is it going to get? Like they're doing it for TV records, and then like I saw they did it for like Britain's Got Talent, like a huge audience, and I think they've done it for a few award shows. I'm genuinely like, what? Imagine if like the Olympics is just loads and loads of. It would just look like something off Black Mirror, wouldn't it?
It really would.
Yeah, it really would.
It's so mad.
It really would. Yeah, it's gonna be so. It's just all been so interesting.
Yeah, it's been a weird one.
So, Maisie, we're obviously, this is Epilepsycast, and we're here to talk about all sorts of things, but one of the things we're here to talk about is your epilepsy, and Purple Day is obviously the day of international kind of conversation about epilepsy, and one of the things that you're really open about is your epilepsy. I just wondered, one of the things we're thinking about for Purple Day this year is about like misconceptions about epilepsy or myths.
Yeah.
And I wondered like what you've kind of come across, or if there's anything that like what annoys you the most, basically, that people think about epilepsy that just isn't true for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think straight away the first one, and I'm sure you've had this a lot, but is that everybody assumes it's flashing lights and it's photosensitive. And so especially, I guess, from my perspective with my line of work, where you have to sort of sign health declaration forms before recording anything, you say, yes, I'm epileptic, and straight away the lighting designer comes over and is like, right, are you going to be all right with these lights, these studio lights? I will turn them on, but I'll tell you before I turn them on and stuff. And you're like, it's absolutely, it's not at all to do with that. It never has been for me. So that's been like a huge, and definitely even before like I went into comedy, that was the thing I found answering the most about when saying that I was epileptic, was people worried about flashing lights, people naturally assuming that that's what we had to stay clear of. My mates looking out for me, going, oh, right, okay. I remember like going to the cinema and there was an advert where there was like somebody on the red carpet with all these flashing cameras, and my mate being like, is Maisie okay? And I was like, yes, I'm fine.
I'm absolutely A-okay, actually, thanks.
Yeah. So it's I guess that is the one that jumps out to me straight away. I think as well, more recently, I'm very lucky with my epilepsy in that it is, I'm seizure free 18 months at the moment, and it's been fairly easy to control that. And I'm very aware that I'm very lucky with mine, and I know exactly now what it is that can trigger it and what I can do to help manage it most effectively. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions for people, and this absolutely is the case for some people, but I get it a lot, that people think it's that it's totally uncontrollable and can strike at any minute, in almost like it's a sneeze, like it creeps. Do you know what I mean? Like it creeps up on you.
Yeah.
And so I find myself often having to say, I'm epileptic, but don't worry, it's completely fine. You won't notice it. It's completely controlled by self-administered medication. Yeah. I've got it all. And of course I get that I have to, you know, people need to know what the thing is. But I think because of what we see and hear about epilepsy, a lot of people immediately think foaming at the mouth, dropping to the floor with no warning, and that can happen any minute from the moment I've told you I'm epileptic.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's such a varied thing. There's
Yeah.
so many different types, and then even then, within the categories, everybody's got a different relationship with it. So I think the frustration is, but at the same time, it's a mild frustration because I understand where people's
Absolutely.
misconceptions come from. That when you're told somebody is epileptic, wait and let them tell you exactly what their type is, what their what their state is with it, because it will be completely different. I could meet somebody who's got the exact same type of epilepsy, but they could be somebody who could just drop any minute, and it's so different. So I think just maybe like the whole hold back on any assumptions until the facts have been given to you. My favourite one, I do think though, is somebody asked if I had an EpiPen. I was like,
right.
I think that's for nut allergies. I don't think.
I've heard of someone who was having a seizure and the first aider shouted, "Find an EpiPen!" And they were like, no, EpiPen, epilepsy, they're not the same.
I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been a trip on at university. We were going, I think, to like a show or something. And somebody was like the head of course was like, "Maisie, have you got your EpiPen?" And I was like, I don't have a peanut allergy. Like, I don't. You might as well like ask if I've packed my wellies. I don't.
Yeah, like it's completely irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
Important for some, not for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Epilepsy is just one of those things that affects everybody so differently, isn't it? So for some people, like it's 100 seizures a day type situation, and for some people, it's controlled, and so you got to listen to people and what they're telling you.
Yeah.
It is such a varied condition, and like it's just the TV representation of tonic-clonics and flashing lights, and that's just what everyone assumes it is, but it's so much more than that, and it's so awesome that you pointed that out. I wanted to talk about a little bit like how that first kind of diagnosis and them first seizures, how they started, because me and Hattie kind of watched your show Vague, and you talk about you were diagnosed at 14 with juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. JME, big grime artist as well.
Yes.
And you mentioned Boy Better Know in Vague as well, and it's
I know,
it's
right?
funny you mentioned that because they did a charity auction for us last year. Actually, did Boy
Really?
Better Know, the entire crew? Yeah, they auctioned.
Oh, that's
some of our
wicked.
merch,
That's so cool.
at Wembley Box Park. So yeah, I found that really funny. But just talk about a little bit about that kind of first diagnosis and how you're kind of feeling.
Yeah, so as I said, I was like maybe, I think around when I was like 12, 13, my mum and dad noticed that I was sort of rolling my eyes back and kind of being vacant is what they described it as.
Yeah.
And I never clocked it, never knew that it had like before or after. There was nothing beforehand that would make me think this is going to happen.
It's funny you say that because we hear so many times that like people like of their stories saying that in school they were kind of staring and teachers just thought they weren't paying attention and they get sent
exactly
out and stuff like that.
Exactly. And I only knew that it had happened because my mum and dad would just be looking at me like that and going, have you clocked that? Did that go in?
Yeah.
And I was like, did what go in? Sorry. And I think as well, like for a while, there was probably a bit of an assumption that I was, like I joke in my routine that people thought I was rude because I was eye rolling. But I think there was a genuine assumption that I was maybe daydreaming or just sort of zoning out of a conversation. And we went to go and get like a diagnose, and they did the whole thing of sticking all the, like 11 out of Stranger Things, just stuck all over my head.
Yeah.
And I mean, even when we were told it's a type of epilepsy, I actually don't think they used the juvenile myoclonic epilepsy at that point. They just said it was childhood absent seizures. That was all we were told at that time. I don't think they call it petit mal anymore, do they? But that was what they were. Petit mal seizures was what they were saying, and that even going back to those misconceptions, I remember when they said epilepsy, I was like, no, that's not what this is. I'm just clearly going a bit vacant for a bit. And so I don't really remember it being particularly a huge thing, because it was never a huge thing to me. And I was zoning out for a couple of seconds here and there, so I really didn't clock that it was that thing. I was like, yeah, I guess on paper I'm epileptic, but I don't feel like I've got something that I need to manage. I don't feel any particular side effects or...
And that's another example of it being so varied, isn't it? It's like
yeah. And I think as well, so I had a condition from birth, which has meant that I've always had 2 tablets in the morning, 2 tablets at night. I've always had it. So when this was diagnosed, it was like, oh, and now you just have this tablet. It was a Epilim. They're like, you just add that on top. So even in terms of a routine of getting into things of taking tablets, it just wasn't a huge step for me. So I think for a lot of people on their journey with epilepsy, the diagnosis is a big thing. It really wasn't. It was just like, oh, right, I guess I've got, like when people discover they've got an allergy, they're like, oh, right, I've got that. I need to remember for next time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like that for a while. And then as I went through my teens, it was all fine, absolutely manageable. And then got to like, and you'll have seen this if you've watched Vague, but got to sort of those like mid to late teen years where you're going out at night with your mates and you're drinking for the first time. And I did clock that in the mornings I'd be a little bit more vague and a little bit more slow. And I started noticing that like my arms would jerk, and it was always in the morning. So it was things like I'd be getting ready for school and like doing up my school buttons, and then I'd hit myself in the face, and I was like, but I didn't really connect the dots. I was just like, oh, that's weird. And it was usually if I'd been late to bed, not slept very well, forgotten to have my tablets the night before, anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'd have my tablet that morning, and I'd be right by 10 a.m. by the time I was at school. It was fine. And then one summer, me and my friends, we went to V Festival, and we were driving down. Again, I talk about this in Vegas, so sorry if you've heard all this before. But we were driving down, and it's just like a typical thing of when you're excited to go to something like that with your mates.
Yeah,
the last thing on your mind is remembering to take your meds. So as much as I'm sat here going, oh, it was just routine, I've always taken meds, that the night before I was staying at my mates, and I think we were just so excited about what we did, and I forgot to take my medication. The next morning we were up early to get in the car, and I hadn't taken my tablet that morning, so I'd missed two rounds, right? And then I was in the car, and I was feeling a bit sort of like slow and vacant, but nothing that I hadn't had on a school morning before.
Yeah.
And it would have been about 3 hours into the journey, so about like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. And I was in the passenger seat, and we were stuck in traffic. And my mate said, because I was eating a muffin at the time, and my mate said that like I just jerked, the muffin went like on the floor, and I didn't. If somebody drops something on the floor in a car, you quickly try and pick it up, 5-second rule, or you chuck it out the window. And it jerked out my hand, and I just sort of let it roll. And they looked at me, and they said that my head had gone back, my arms had locked up and crossed over, and I was very clearly like not right. And they just said I was rocking a little bit. And so they were already stationary because we were stuck in traffic, and my mate rang an ambulance, and I think in the meantime like tried to find somebody who could help. I had no recollection of this, but when I woke up we were at the like hard shoulder, and an ambulance had managed to weave through, and I was in the ambulance when I came to. And I remember them saying like, asking me the questions and being really confused, and I couldn't answer them very well. And I said I'm epileptic, but even then I think I was like, I'm epileptic, but like not really,
Yeah.
And they were like, well, no, you've had a seizure. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I don't have seizures. I just go blank every now and then, but I don't have this. And my tongue was all swollen. They were like, you've bitten your tongue, you've had a tonic-clonic seizure. And I was, like, I'll be honest, I was terrified. I was terrified because it had never happened before. And when I think when you've lived with something for several years as well, if, this wasn't happening a couple of weeks into being diagnosed. I'd lived with it thinking it's this one thing for a while.
Yeah.
And then it presented itself, it sort of went up a tier, And so I was really quite taken aback and was like, oh, this is quite big actually, and it was the first time I'd really realised that there was a repercussion for not taking my meds.
Right.
Whereas before I'd be like, oh, I didn't take my tablets last night, I felt a bit funny this morning, but it's fine.
It's all okay,
Yeah, I guess like I literally thought of it as like, oh, if you've got hay fever and you don't take your hay fever tablets, you might feel it a bit worse.
You might sneeze a bit more.
Yeah, but you're not like at death's door.
No.
So I never really worried about it, and I the main thing I took away from it was because my parents were on holiday as well, and the ambulance were going, because you're under 18, is there anyone we can ring to let them know? And I was so determined not for my mum and dad to know. I was like, no, absolutely not. I don't want them to know. And also I was looking at my mates who were in the car, and they looked so worried and so concerned, and it was that feeling as well of being not a burden, because they were so great about it, but it was that made me realise how serious it was, because I realised how much I'd worried them. And I sort of was like, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to do that. And whereas before, if I missed a tablet, the repercussions in quotations were A, not that big, and B, only really affected me, whereas this was something that could have, really impacted the whole weekend. I mean, it didn't. I had my tablets. We went and had a Yorkshire pudding, the thingy. I remember that. Like, I remember just being like, I'm really hungry. So we went and got like a right good meal under me, and then we had a great weekend.
Paid like 12 quid for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bankrupted myself on day one. But that was like the first time I clocked it, and it was that sort of like made a kick up the ass, basically. I was trying to think of a polite way to say it, but it was a kick up the ass of trying to make sure that I took my tablets, and so it didn't happen again until about a year and a half later, when pretty much the same situation. I'd been out with my mates on a night out, come home that night, hadn't taken my tablet, and then had to be up for work. And I think I would have definitely taken it the next morning, but I had a seizure on the way to work, and it was like, and it was a tonic-clonic one again. So, but that's something that for the first 3 years of being diagnosed as epileptic, a tonic-clonic seizure didn't come along till 3 years. 3 years in. Yeah.
And I think the way it's saying there, like, you kind of wanted to keep your independence. I think that's like that's something that a lot of like newly diagnosed people can definitely relate to, and I think particularly like younger as you were, and it's almost
and I think
like
as well
you don't want to
it relates back to the I don't want to say stigma, but the perceptions of epilepsy. I think even at that time I still had a perception, because I was like, I'm epileptic but not really. This was kind of like holding it right up into my face, going, no, you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I realise now I always was epileptic, but it was only when I had a tonic-clonic seizure that I sort of respected it as that. And I think I didn't want to say it because I wanted my independence, but I also didn't really want to acknowledge that I was a fully fledged member of the Epileptic Society.
All right.
It was something that I think I tried to suppress for a while, and wasn't 100% honest with people about, and wasn't 100% honest with myself about, because I saw it as a threat to all of those things, my independence, my sort of young person lifestyle that I wanted at that time,
Yeah.
So, and I'm now 27. I still love a night out, but because I know how to manage it, and I know what sort of, and I have to be honest with myself and others, I can it's not like, oh, I had that seizure and since then I've never been allowed back in a nightclub. Like, I still it's so possible to like have the life that I was so defensive of, but at that moment it felt very much like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah, it feels a threat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, exactly.
So obviously, with all of that kind of in your mind and all of that, it's a huge thing to have to like wrestle with on your own at like 17, like all of this like threat and worry and concern, but still I think it's amazing that you decided that like a career standing up in front of people and being funny was the career for you. I wondered kind of when that happened, when that shift happened.
So I guess, and as a youngster, I was always a drama kid. Like, I was definitely the annoying drama kid at school.
Me too.
Just absolutely loved it. And always got the roles that were like the funny one. And I much preferred them. And because you get immediate feedback. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're playing Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, you don't know if you're doing a good job because you've not got any lines where the audience are meant to immediately laugh back. That, like, laughter is such an immediate feedback reaction, whereas I much preferred the role, probably from an ego like perspective of, if you, as I say, if you're playing Juliet and everyone claps at the end, you don't know if they're clapping for you or for the whole like production, or if they thought the production was good but you were naff. Whereas if you get a laugh, that's not for anyone else, that's for you. So I loved it. And I think I always leant more towards comedy, but I never considered it as a career. And then I went to drama school. I had a really good drama teacher who told me to go to drama school rather than university, because I was not interested in essays and writing and all that. So she said, go to drama school, which I did. And drama school is a very weird place. It's very strange. And I think to be brutally honest, I think over the 3 years, I learned a lot, but a lot of that was learning that I liked performance, but I didn't want to be an actor. I didn't want to be, or certainly just an actor. I say that as in I'm now a comedian and I do acting, but I definitely got to the end of that and realised that acting is, it's so dependent on so many other factors. So it's a lot of going to audition after audition after audition, and you could be perfect for it, but they've just decided. So like, you could go for an audition for an advert where you're on a date with a lad, and you could be perfect for this role, and you've prepped and prepped and prepped and prepped and prepped. You're exactly the type of look that they were going for, but just before you walked in, they found the lad that they really want, and the lad is 5'10", and then you come in and you're 5'11", and they're just suddenly like, it can be literally, that's what I mean, it can be down to just something so trivial as to the fact your hair is just a little bit too mousy, or you're a little bit too tall, or you're a little bit too Yorkshire, or you're a little bit like, it could be down to so many things. And then even if you get a play or whatever, or you get anything, you can be great, you can be, hard work ethic, you've done all the work, all the research, you've used all your training, you're easy to work with, you do the work and you do it well, but the director could be rubbish, or the person you're starring opposite could be a nightmare to work with, and isn't pulling their weight, and it's making the whole production naff, or the venue could be rubbish. There's so many factors that it just relies. It's like, do you know what it is? It's a massive group project. And at uni, I hated group projects because you're there working away, and then the other three don't do anything, and you end up with your overall mark just being a bit naff, even though you've put blood, sweat and tears into it. So acting is a group project, and comedy, well, you write it, you do it. If it's good, you get all the praise, and if it's naff, you can't blame anyone else because it's all on you. So I like that control element. I guess that shows from what we were just talking about with my epilepsy as a teen. I like to be in control. I like to be independent and make my own choices. And comedy lets you do that. Comedy, it's like, as long as you've written the material, you book yourself in for a comedy night, and if you're good, you'll get booked again. So you're booked off merit. You're booked off something you've done. You're not booked off somebody saying they're good or somebody getting you in there. Like, even if you've got a mate who will get you a gig somewhere, you could turn up, die on you won't get booked again. So it's a proper meritocracy. I love it, but I don't think I'd have realised I wanted to do comedy had I not gone and done acting and then realised all of that.
I think
I find it easier as well. I find it easier to be passionate about because, God, there's some rubbish plays out there. And well, there are, and sometimes you'd be applying for stuff and you'd be like, this is awful. Like, whose story is that? And I can't get passionate about it. And I'm somebody who really struggles to do something unless I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so with stand-up, you pick what you talk about. You choose what it is that you want to, like, literally stand on stage and say to a group of people with a microphone. It's like public speaking or debating. Yeah. You're not going to get up there and do it with something you're not about. So I quite like that, really. It's probably, again, a bit of an egotistical thing, but hey-ho.
I think stand-up's like one of the hardest like jobs out there, and I like hold my hands up to you because like there's that stand-up to cancer thing going on where some comedians are teaching
did you watch it?
Celebrities.
Did you watch this, Hattie?
Yes.
Oh my lord.
Oh gosh.
That guy.
I was watching it with like a pillow over my feet.
Yeah, me too. Hands like peeking through my fingers.
I said to my boyfriend, because I was like, do you know what? When it was first announced a few months back, because I know a few people, the comics who've done it, as in teaching. But when it was first announced, it was like a month into COVID or whatever, and a lot of people were like, "This is not cool that Channel 4 have given a comedy show to celebs that aren't even comedians when the comedy circuit is on such a thing." And I was kind of like, okay, I get it. And then I watched it and was like, actually, first of all, it's for a good cause, so fine. Like, pick your battles, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And second of all, it actually showed that our job isn't just getting up and being that mate at the pub that's got a funny story to say, because I think Jason Manford said it on the show, otherwise everybody would be a comedian.
Yeah.
It's actually a proper skill.
Yeah. And it really is.
And it's so easy to go wrong. Like, just because you've got a joke or you've got a story that is funny, it's not the same as doing stand-up.
No, it's all in the delivery.
I actually really liked it because I was like, oh, it's actually proving that my job is actually really hard. Because I think a lot of the time, even my mates are like, yeah, all right, we can all get on stage and tell a few not jokes. It's like, it's actually really difficult, thank you.
It's actually really, really hard. It takes a lot of work and effort, actually, thanks.
Yeah.
So, speaking of your stand-up, you make, obviously, epilepsy a part of, your routines. And again, going back to Vague, you obviously making a few jokes about seizures and that kind of thing, and you tell the audience it's okay to laugh. I think humour is such a big way of coping for a lot of people, and like for me, comedy always takes me like to a different place. It's almost like a comfort and things like that. And kind of what made you decide to be like, oh, I'll put epilepsy as part of my routine?
So I think with comedy, and again they explored this so brilliantly well in that program, that Stand Up to Cancer program. In comedy, I think you have to be relatable. You have and I think people love that. It's my favourite thing when you go to a comedy night, either as an audience member. I love watching comedians and going, oh my god, that's so true, and I love it as a comedian when you say stuff and you can see people sat there going, oh my god, that's you, Hattie, or that's you, Rick, that you do that. It's perfect because you've hit something there. But similarly, it has to be unique, because otherwise it's like, what's the deal with airplane food? And it's just really really generic. So I think the idea for talking about epilepsy, because as I say, I didn't talk about it much. I've not always been open about it, and as a teen, my mates knew I was epileptic, but they kind of knew like how I did, of like, she's epileptic, but not really.
Yeah.
And so with Vague, I'd only been doing stand up for a year when I did Vague, because I won a comedy competition where the prize was to do a show at Edinburgh, and so I very quickly had to decide what that show was going to be about. And when you've got no profile, no one knows who you are. I think I was 23 at the time, so no profile, no TV credits, no nothing really. I've got not even experience on my side. I've been going for less than a year. So you have to bait your first show kind of has to be an introduction to who you are, and letting the audience in and saying, this is me. So again, if you've seen Vague, I talk about being where I'm from, a bit about like me as a person, and then I wanted to do a show that was just about that, really. But everybody does a show that's an introduction show for their first thing. So what is it about you that makes it different? What is it that makes your show? What is it that your story is a little bit different that not everybody might have? And for me, it was a coming of age show, but when I was coming of age, I was going through this. I was sort of still working it out myself. I was still trying to wrestle with it, still trying, half trying to pretend it wasn't happening, but half having to realise that it was. Managing it. And I think as well, it was also something that I wasn't exactly at the finish line of, and I won't ever, but it's still something that I'm managing. And the fact that it changed 3 years, in its format, means it could change again. So I'm never fully, not to say I'm like never fully relaxed, but I'm at least now at not at peace. That sounds very dramatic, but I'm very fine with that being the case.
Yeah.
So I wanted to speak about very relatable humour, which is growing up, which is going out with your mates, which is all of those experiences we've all had, about school teachers, about that mate in the friendship group who does XYZ and that one that does ABC. All of that, people from my village, it was all relatable, but it had this perspective on it that was unique to me. And I think it was it was helpful for me. I'm from a family who are very open. I can chat to my mum and dad. I say I chat to my mum and dad about it. I didn't, and I still don't know why I didn't, because they're so receptive and so open, and so I could say anything and I think they'd be okay about it. They'd just want to know. But I'm from a family who tend to be open with the more difficult things with humour. We that's how we deal with it, and I don't say that to be like that's how we put it off. I think that is genuinely how we deal with it, and it's been great. It's always been the best way for me. We laugh about it, because I think if you don't laugh about it, you can get bogged down in it. That's not to say that there's not days where it's okay to get really miffed about it and peed off about it, and you want to scream about it, but ultimately you have to find the light in it rather than the dark. And so that is what helps me with this is I can't do a TED talk. I just can't take it seriously. And there's no way in this world that I was ever going to do a TED talk about it, or heaven forbid, what would have been worse, a play. God, I cannot imagine what my play would have been like if I'd have done that. So it was always going to be comedy for me, because that's how I communicate, really.
And I think we've kind of based almost that kind of question on a recent article that came out on Mashable, and it was someone with epilepsy who was kind of criticising a Netflix show that kind of made light of seizures, not in a comedic way, almost like in a little bit of a cruel way. And I think I think there's so many perspectives on it, and I think it really does depend on the person. Like you say, you cope with humour, but if someone else doesn't like see epilepsy funny at all, I guess that's their perspective as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult, and I think, and I had it with Vague. I had it with the material. I remember, and it's always going to happen because people, as we were saying at the start of this, every single person's relationship with it is different.
Yeah, 100%.
And you can never know what somebody has gone through with their relationship to it. And that might mean that they are more sensitive or more raw, or things are more raw for them.
Yeah.
However, I think with stand-up, you're the narrator. So you're only ever talking about your experience and your perspective. So you're not standing up there, as I say, like a TED Talk, and being the spokesperson for something. You're being your, and it happened. I remember doing the material the first time. Not the first time. But it was before I'd done Vague. But I was doing the material, and a woman came up to me in like the interval and was like, "Can I just say I found that really difficult?" And I was like, "Oh." And the gig had gone great,
right?
But she was like, "I found that really difficult." I said, "Oh, right. Why was that?" She's like, "My son has epilepsy, and he has seizures every day, and it's really, really hard." And I was like, "I don't deny that. I don't."
No.
Like that absolutely is the reality. But similarly, I'm not going to talk about I'm not going to not talk about what my reality is, and do it through the medium that my job is, which is comedy. Yeah. So it's interesting, and she was one person, and that was 4-5 years ago. Well, what would it be? 2017, so 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That would have been. And in that same time, there's been hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of people who saw me at Edinburgh, people who saw the Mock the Week clip, or people that have like heard other podcasts that I've done about it and have messaged me on Instagram to say it's so nice to just hear it done in a light way. It's so nice to hear it be normalised, and actually it means that the people who can relate feel a bit more like represented, or feel a little bit not validated, but like, oh my god, that's how I feel. And similarly, the people that don't have any connection to it at least leave going, that was funny, and I learned that it's not all about flashing lights.
Yeah, very true, very true. Yeah. Educational and funny.
Yeah, exactly. We're laughing and learning. Yeah.
That could be your tagline: laughing and learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next tour name. We pretty much wrap it up really here, but every guest that we have on, we always ask one final question, the big grand finale, and it's what is one thing, Maisie, that about epilepsy, to someone newly diagnosed, what would you kind of give them as advice? You know, I know it's a big question.
Yeah, it is. It is, and because it's so different for every person, you're like, I don't know what advice they need, because everybody will have a different. But I'd say that certainly one thing I'd like people to know, I think for people who don't have epilepsy, one thing I'd like them to know is that it's so different for every single person. So even if you know the type of epilepsy that they've got, even if you go, oh, I know it's JME, so that's not about flashing lights, it might that my JME might be very different to Joe Public's JME. So be open to that huge like variation that is out there. But I think for people with epilepsy, and having speaking now from experience, be honest about it. Be honest about it with yourself. Be honest about it with other people as well, because it's not half the burden you think it is, and it's so much easier when it is that thing of like, a problem shared is a problem halved. Right. It's so much easier when other people are in the know about it.
Absolutely.
And I know it's really easy to feel like to say it to somebody else is to unload that burden onto somebody else, but it's absolutely not. It's just but keeping it to yourself is only ever going to be unhelpful. I would say, and I think it's important. I think it's important that you share it with other people so that you get that normalization of conversation out there. That's the only way that happens, is through people. And if we all keep it like some hidden secret, like with anything that's happened over the last 50 years, the more you see it represented, the more you see it discussed, the more you see people talking about it in a normal way rather than a don't tell anyone but, or this is really embarrassing, but it makes everything so much. I'm thinking now of like other comics who do it with their things, you know, like going back to how varied it is as well. Like Catherine Bohart spoke when I was doing Vague. Her debut show was called Immaculate, and she spoke about her OCD, which I think everybody immediately, myself included, was like, oh right, so you have to have like your clothes organised in your wardrobe in colour order, do you know what I mean, or your DVDs in alphabetical, or you wash your hands twice. It's not that. It's so varied. There's so many different types of way it manifests itself. People for ages, off of the back of that Big Brother series, thought Tourette's was just meant that you say the F word loads, and it's not. There's loads of different tics. Ishan Akbar is a great comedian who's spoken on Mock the Week about his hearing aid. Like, there's Ed Gamble, who speaks about being diabetic and like just dispels loads and loads of myths. And actually it means that the next time you're at work and somebody goes, oh, I'm diabetic, you might just think back to that time you saw Ed on Mock the Week, or you might think back to that time Catherine spoke about having OCD, and it stops you from going, all right, does that mean that you're superstitious? You know what I mean? You just, you've actually gone, oh, hang on, no, there's a few different ways that this thing that this person just said they've got manifests itself. I'll let them explain how it manifests itself for this person.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, doesn't it? Yeah. The more you get it out there, the misconceptions are dispelled, and like, everyone learns.
Yeah, exactly. And it's totally normal for people to have those misconceptions, because of the information that is out at the moment is quite, like, frustratingly Hollywoodified, simplified, liquidated. It's very bite-sized, isn't it? It's like... Yeah.
And also, the only time that people might ever think about it is when it says on the news, this report may contain images of flashing lights.
Exactly. And you know, epilepsy is that what we have with epilepsy, of the flashing lights and the foaming at the mouth. That is what Catherine has with OCD, with the arranging alphabetical. It is what, like, hearing aid people will have with, like, oh, is it like A Quiet Place where you can't stand too near a radio because then everything will go like high pitched. There'll be so many different types of ways that things manifest themselves. It's just the understanding that's important, but I think that comes from both sides, is us being understanding of why people have those misconceptions, but just hoping that people don't assume. Don't assume. Like, you'll have the misconceptions, I've made my peace with that, but wait for me to set it straight rather than assume. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Maisie. It's been an absolute
so much,
pleasure
Maisie.
talking
Thank
to you.
you. Thank you for having
where
me.
can people keep up with you?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter as @Maisie Adam. It's so weird because normally at the end of a podcast you're like, and I'll be gigging here, and I'm like, I don't know.
On Zoom tomorrow.
I'm indoors for the foreseeable, I think. But I think I'm hoping that I'll be back next year with my third and hopefully best show yet. So
I thought you were going to say a final tour for a second.
Yeah, I was going to say third and final show.
Oh my god, no!
Because no
I'm
one
going
shows
to be
up.
retiring at 28. No, I do not have the financial support for that. No.
Oh, cheers, Maisie. Thanks so much.
Thanks
for that.
so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Awesome stuff. I absolutely loved that conversation. I think that Maisie had some really absolutely beautiful things to say about epilepsy and different people's experiences with it and coming to terms with it. You know, we've said before on this podcast that it's a really tough thing to deal with, particularly when you're a teenager, and through that growing up kind of time, and I just think she had some awesome and really beautiful things to say.
Yeah, I think incredibly relatable, and like she goes into so many things that I think a lot of people with epilepsy can really identify with. I think particularly like young people who've just been diagnosed. So yeah, absolutely amazing. And like she said, just keep up with her on Twitter and Instagram, and if you haven't seen her show Big, you can check it out on Amazon.
Thanks so much, Maisie.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that'll about do it right now for the Epilepsy Cast. We are planning a series 2. It's coming. It might not be with Hattie because she is going to be on maternity leave for a lot of 2021. But the best way to kind of keep up with us and the next episode of the podcast will be following us on social media at Epilepsy Action on pretty much anything. And if you subscribe to us on, whether you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, you'll get that directly to your feed. But hi, this might be the last podcast we do together for a little while. I'm not sure. Maybe you'll drop in for an episode in season 2, but you're going to be missed. But I'm sure you'll be back.
But yes, I'm sure, and I'm sure you're going to do some awesome things. And if you haven't already come across our other bonus cast for Purple Day, which is lots of voices of lots of different people with epilepsy, or talking about the misconceptions that they've come across and what they would like people to know about epilepsy, then do look for that in your feeds as well. I think that's definitely well worth a listen to. So we will be back soon, and in the meantime, we wish you all the very best.
Let's not leave it so long next time. See you in a bit.